Okay, so today we are doing a Sanderson tier list in celebration of a new Sanderson book. We got The Lost Metal, the conclusion to Mistborn Era 2. So I figured it was a good time to do a tier list right at the end of 2022, talking about how I would rank all of the Sanderson books that I've read before we go into the year 2023, where it's just gonna be a waterfall of books. So I've not read every single Sanderson piece of work out there, but I have read many, 20. Wow, 20. I've read 20 things that are on this list. I did not include the Skyward novellas in this list because they aren't written by Sanderson. I know that he closely worked with the authors that did those novellas, but he himself didn't write them, so I didn't include them on this list. I don't know if that was the right decision or wrong decision, but it is the decision that was made. This is going to be a spoiler-free video. I will not give any spoilers for any of these books whatsoever, so if you haven't read very much Sanderson, you're safe to still watch this video. The only thing that might be considered the mildest of spoilers is because I'm a dork, I decided to create my tier list, and I decided to make my tiers instead of like S tier, A tier, B tier, etc. I made them Cosmere references. It's a spoiler-free video. For videos that are more opinion-based, like this one, I tend to try to make them more of a participation, more of a conversation, instead of me just giving my opinions and then leaving. So what I ask of you, if you're interested, is I would love for y'all to leave your tier list in the comments as well. You don't have to use my goofy tier list names. You can just do S, A, B, etc. if you want to, but I would really, really love to just scroll through a ton of comments, seeing how y'all rank your books. So real quick, my tiers, the top tier, the S tier, is Idonosium, which I'm not entirely sure I'm pronouncing correctly. This is the creator of the Cosmere, the god with the big G. Next up we have shards, which are shards of Idonosium. During the shattering, Idonosium was broken into 17 shards. So that's the A tier. Next up we have Spren, which are elements of the cognitive realm that have seeped into the physical realm, so they're not quite so high up in this manufactured hierarchy that I'm creating, but they're a little, they're still spiritual. Then we have the cognitive shadows, which are people who have died and chosen not to pass into the beyond, and so they're likened to ghosts, even though there's more to them than that. So that's the next tier. And then finally we have Creme, which is brown sludge that comes after a storm. If none of that made sense to you, it's okay. It's still the exact same order, highest to lowest. You can see. You get it, hopefully. Spoiler alert, there will be nothing in the Creme tier because I have enjoyed every Sanderson book I've read, even the ones that I find to be disappointing, that I think are just okay. I always have a good time reading his books, so there's nothing that'll be in the Creme. So the first series that we'll be discussing in this video is Mistborn, the Final Empire. The reason that it's first is because this is my first introduction to Sanderson and the series that got me back into fantasy when I thought that I didn't like fantasy anymore. So, The Final Empire. So for me, I've read through the Mistborn trilogy 3 times, I think. And even though this is one of Sanderson's earlier works, so some of his weaknesses as a writer are more on display in this trilogy, he's still an incredible storyteller in this trilogy. And I just really, really love this story. So the first book, I'm gonna put it in the top tier. I'll just say S tier to make it easier on everybody. I'm gonna put it in S tier. I still think that this trilogy is still maybe my favorite trilogy. I'm really not sure how I would rank Mistborn and Stormlight, which one I would say is a little bit higher than the other, but this is still one of my top Sanderson books. I love it. And Age of Ascension, I actually love even a little bit more. I think it's phenomenal. I enjoyed the politicking. I love seeing Vin's growth. There's a lot of side plot things that were happening that I adored. I know that it's slower and I can understand why it doesn't suit everybody, but it does suit me. Then we have Hero of Ages, which I'm gonna put in the Shard tier. I think that it's also fantastic. I really enjoyed the conclusion of this trilogy. I thought it was solid. I have my complaints about this book. I have my nitpicks. There are certain things that I didn't like that I would love to change, but it's still a very good conclusion, and I think that it's easily an A tier book. Next up, we have the Stormlight Archive. Way of Kings, top tier. I love Way of Kings. I'll put it even above the first Mistborn book. Maybe. It's so hard because there's such different stories and they accomplish such different things, so it's hard to pit them against each other. It's gonna go there. It's gonna go there. We'll see if I change my mind later. I love The Way of Kings. I thought it was a phenomenal introduction into this epic, epic story. Kaladin's entire arc in this story, in this one single book, his arc is tops, just tops. Then we have Words of Radiance, which is probably my favorite Sanderson book that I've read. All of the strengths of Way of Kings, even though it focused on Shallan, a character that as the series progresses, I am not connecting with anymore. I still loved her story. I loved her backstory. I loved the expansion of characters and world that we got here. I think that it was very, very well paced and plotted. Next we have Edge Dancer, which I'm putting in the Sprint tier. And the reason I'm doing that is because I love Lift. I know a lot of people have problems with Lift. I love her. I think that she's adorable and I think she's so much fun and I love hanging out with her. However, I don't think this needed to be a novella. There's very little essential information in this novella, and this is a me thing. It's my preference, but I don't like novellas that have just a tiny bit of information you need, but really it could easily be worked into the story. And I think that what we got out of Edge Dancer could have easily been worked into the story. It's a storytelling choice. It's a choice that Sanderson has made more than once. It's a choice that other authors have made as well, and it's their choice to make. I just personally, there's a lot of authors that I love to read from. There's a lot of books that I'm really, really excited to read. So for me, I prefer the stories that I read to be necessary. Next up we have Oathbringer, and I enjoy Oathbringer, but I don't like it near on the same level as the first two. I think that Dalinar's story is phenomenal in this, but I also think that this was one of those books that could have definitely taken some cuts. It was more meandering than the other ones were, and it was still excellent, but not, for me, not as good as the others. I'm gonna put it in A tier with the shards, and it's gonna be behind Hero of Ages for me. Next we have Rhythm of War, which I know, this is one of those books that people are either like, it's my favorite or it's my least favorite of the Stormlight Archive books. It seems to be kind of divisive in the fandom. And it's definitely, it's a shard for me. I still kind of struggle. When I first read it, my opinion was it's a little bit below Oathbringer. They both have flaws for me. Like there were certain character arcs that I just did not find satisfying in Rhythm of War. And it too, I felt was meandering in some places, but I still really loved it. And I really kind of put it equally with Oathbringer. And I don't know, I'm tempted to put it here. The problem too is that I've read every Stormlight book twice. This is 2. I've read every Stormlight book twice, except for Rhythm of War. So it's hard for me to rank it because all I have is my initial feelings off of it. I guess I'll stay true to those initial feelings. I'll put it slightly below Oathbringer just because I do think that Dalinar's story is extremely compelling, but think of them as if they're the same. Next we have Dawnshard, and this is another one that I think was fun. I enjoyed reading it, but again, I'm not a fan of this particular choice of having essential information off on a side story. I know Sanderson calls it a novella, and therefore everybody else does too, but it's a novel. The word count is novel. So it's a side story that's a novel length that I don't think is satisfying enough on its own personally for me to rank it any higher than this, though I did enjoy reading it, and I'm excited to see what all the little nuggets, how they're all gonna pay off in the future. Maybe I would rank it higher in the future, but this is where it lives right now. Next we have Alloy of Law. Do I wanna put it in Spren or Cognitive Shadow? Alloy of Law, the beginning of Mistborn Era 2, I enjoyed, but I didn't love by any means. I thought that it was good, not great. And Spren is the B tier, so I think it belongs there. I'll probably put it I'll put it in front of Dawn Shard. Yeah, that feels right. That's about where I would put Alloy of Law. I thought that it was good, not great, and I am really, really glad that I continued with the series because man, did it get great. Shadows of Self, I think is still my favorite of Mistborn Era 2. It's a really solid series. I had so much fun with it. It's a totally different tone than anything else that Sanderson has written that I've read, and it was fun, and it was clever, and it was well paced, and it was so, I have enjoyed Era 2 a lot. Doesn't touch either Mistborn Era 1 or Stormlight, but I think that it's a lot of fun. So Shadows of Self, love Shadows of Self. Bands of Mourning, love Bands of Mourning. And the Lost Metal, I don't know where to put. Do I put it, Shadows of Self is still my number 1 of Era 1. So is the Lost Metal number 2 or number 3? It's tough to say because honestly, Shadows of Self, Bands of Mourning, and the Lost Metal are all pretty much on the same level for me. The thing is that I think that Sanderson did such a great job of incorporating the Cosmere elements to the Lost Metal while also explaining everything that needs to be explained, and the rest of it is just Easter eggs. It's just fun. And I had so much fun with these Cosmere connections that we got, which I won't go into because this is spoiler free. Which, by the way, if you don't know, I have a second channel that's dedicated to discussing what I'm reading. You should check it out if you want to. Tomorrow, this video is going out on a Monday, and tomorrow we have a discussion coming out for The Lost Metal with Michael Knipp and Bookborn, so you should come hang out with us and talk about The Lost Metal with us. Anyway, I think my gut, after just finishing it, my gut is to put The Lost Metal right before the Bands of Mourning, but after I've had some time to sit on it, I might put Bands of Mourning. But again, Shadows, Bands, and Lost Metal, they're all on the same level for me. I had so much fun. This is one of those series of Sanderson where I don't take it nearly as seriously as I take Mistborn Era 1 and Stormlight, so I'm just able to have fun, and I had fun. Next up we have Skyward. I would put Skyward. My question is, do I put it before Shadows or do I put it behind Bands? It's definitely a shard. I really, really loved Skyward. I think that it's really, really solid YA. I love Spensa, and I think that it was a really, really fun story. I think it was really strong. I think I'm gonna put it here. I think I'm going to put it, it's not fair because I just completed Era 2, so I feel like I'm not being fully fair. I think I'm gonna put it here. I think Spensa is probably the best YA protagonist. Best is a little bit, let me put it more subjective. I think Spensa is my favorite YA protagonist I've ever read. I'll link my Skyward review if you're interested, but basically Spensa is 16-year-old Murphy. I've never seen myself reflected in a YA novel like I've seen myself reflected in Skyward, and it was written by a middle-aged man, which I don't know how to reckon with that, so I'm just gonna pretend I didn't say it. But yeah, Spensa means a lot to me, and I love her. So she's a shard. Spensa is a shard for me. Starsight, this is one of my hot takes probably because it seems like almost everybody likes Starsight more than Skyward, but I actually put it a little bit below Skyward, and I'm gonna put it in a Spren. I think that it was a really, really good book. I enjoyed it a lot, but it didn't hit me nearly as hard as Skyward did. I think on a technical level, it's just as good as Skyward, but on a personal level, Skyward is higher. Cytonic, we have our first cognitive shadow. Cytonic was such a bummer for me. It was such a letdown. I still enjoyed it. I still had a good time reading it, but I do think that this book was just okay. This book felt like a side plot to a side plot. It was a bumski for me. Still good. I still enjoyed it. I still had a good time reading it, but for a Sanderson, it was a bumski. Next up we have a Steelheart, which is another cognitive shadow. Get out of the way. It's another C tier. I actually never continued on with this trilogy, and I probably never will. Not because I disliked it, just because there's a lot of stuff that's more interesting to me than this. This is a YA superhero story, and I enjoyed reading it. I had a good time. I never don't have a good time with a Sanderson book, but with how many authors I follow and how many books I'm interested in, Steelheart just is not high on the list for me. So I think it's solid, but I'm not gonna continue with the trilogy. Okay, now we're in the standalones of his that I've read. So first we have Elantris, which I think I'm gonna also put in the cognitive shadow. I'll put it ahead of Steelheart because I did really enjoy it. And if Sanderson does continue to add to the Elantris story, which I don't think he will, but if he does, I'll read it. But much like Mistborn, with it being one of his really early works, some of his weaknesses as a writer are very prominent in Elantris, but his strengths as a storyteller were still there. Warbreaker is, I feel like I hear so many people say that Warbreaker is his weakest or one of his weakest novels. I see a lot of people put Warbreaker and Elantris kind of on the same level, and I'm just not there. This is another one of those books where I feel like he's a great storyteller, and this is a book that I see a lot of people say this is Sanderson not being a good storyteller, and I just don't agree. I think that it was a really, really fun story. All the different characters that were in it were so fun. All the different humans and gods and the way the story interconnected and their stories tied together. The reveals were so fun. I really connected with the characters, and I think this is one of those books. It was one of my first Sanderson books that I read, and Sanderson was the one that reintroduced me to fantasy as an adult. And it was just fun. It was a great entry point for me as someone who is just getting into the genre. Plus it has some tropes that I just really, really enjoy. Plus the magic in this is really fun. I think it's good. I'm gonna put it as a sprint, and I'm gonna put it before Alloy of Law. I'm gonna put it before Edge Dancer. Yeah, I think that this is a solid book. People are hard on it, and you're allowed to be hard on it, but I'm not. And last we have The Emperor's Soul. I actually just finished reading this today. After reading The Lost Metal, like I said, there were a lot of Easter eggs, and again, still keeping this spoiler-free, but there was one particular Easter egg that was from The Emperor's Soul that I had not read, and I was totally fine. I did not need to have read it to read The Lost Metal, or to understand what was going on, or to enjoy what was happening in the story, but I really enjoyed that element a lot, and I wanted more of it, so I hung out with The Emperor's Soul, and it was very nice. This is one of the novellas that kind of breaks my personal beef with these novellas, which is that it was a self-contained story. It was on its own. It wasn't just an add-on to a larger story that didn't need to be an add-on, did it not? It was its own self-contained story, and it was a really good story on its own. So, where would I put it? I think I'll chuck it right here. Yeah, that feels good. I really, really enjoyed this. I thought that it was a solid, this is my B tier. Yeah, that feels right. I feel good about that. Now, okay. So with the top tier being the God tier, like the best Sanderson's written, my favorite of his stories, this feels right. 2 Stormlights, 2 Mistborns, books 1 and 2 of each. And then for A tier, something that is great. That is a great, great story. It is a shard of a god. It may not be God tiered, but it is shards of him. Is Hero of Ages, Oathbringer, Words of Rhythm of War, Shadow of Self, Lost Metal, Bands of Mourning. Do I want to put Lost Metal before or after Bands of Mourning? It's just not fair because I just finished reading it. I need to sit on it to really know where it needs to be. I'm just gonna leave it there for now. Though it may move to here as time passes. But for now, this is where it lives. And then Skyward, and I'll also recognize that I am very biased with Skyward because I connected my teen self connected with Spensa so much. Then we have Starsight, which I know is a bit of a hot take to put it in the B tier, but forgive me. Please make your own tier list in the comments. The Emperor's Soul, Warbreaker, Edge Dancer, Alloy of Law, Dawn Shard, and then in C tier we have Elantris, Steelheart, and Cytonic. That all feels right. I feel like I did a good job here. Okay, that is my Sanderson tier list for all of the books that I have read. This is definitely a video that I could do again at the end of next year because we're getting a lot of new Sanderson content next year and I'm so excited for it. So let me know if you'd like to see this again. Again, check out my second channel if you want to. That's dedicated to talking about what I am currently reading, giving little reviews for what I read, and reading vlogs or in-depth discussions for some of the books that I really, really love. That's always linked in the description. You can also check out my Patreon if you feel like it. We do a lot of buddy reads over there. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on this channel, Tuesdays and Thursdays on the second channel. I'll see you again soon. Bye.